What's the scariest thing you've ever seen while driving at night? Story 1. I was on Interstate 70 in Colorado going towards Utah. Pulled over at a gas station at 8 in the evening. Fueling up, I noticed a couple of attractive women pumping gas. On the other side of the pump was the man in his late 40s, just staring at these young women without notice of anything else going on around him. I walk inside to go grab some food for the next few hours of driving. When I come out, I see both the younger women's car and the older man's truck are gone. I decided to hang out at the gas station for the next hour to catch a little sleep before hitting the road again. After driving for a few hours, I was speeding heavy. I pull over at yet another gas station. The young women are there getting gas and eating some food on a picnic table. Looked like they had been there for a while. I did not see any sign of the man in the truck, but cannot say I was looking very hard for it. Well, here is where it got creepy as hell. Cannot say I did not stare at them a bit. I mean, they were good-looking women. As I am watching them leave, I see in the next parking lot over some headlights turn on, and it is the same man as before. He leaves when the women leave once again. Okay, that is a bit weird, but could just be a coincidence, as there were not many places to pull over. I leave a few minutes later and catch up to them. Now this guy is riding their rear with his high beams on. I decided to slow down and stay a distance behind the truck. 10 minutes or so later, the women pull over once again to most likely get this guy off their rear. With a sign of relief, the truck keeps going, and I continue on my way. About 1 mile down the road, the guy just pulls off to the side of the highway, so I pull off a mile or so down the road again. Sure enough, the women drive by, and the guy is still following them. At this point, we are out in the middle of nowhere, and too many coincidences have happened. I called the police to alert them, and about 15 minutes later, the police pulled the guy over. I could have just seen too many horror movies that started like this and overreacted, but you never know. Better safe than sorry. Story 2. I told this story before, but one time I was driving with my girlfriend through Wisconsin on the way back home. It was really late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up. My global positioning system ended up putting me on a small highway instead of the expressway right away after leaving there. But I did not want to complicate things more, so I just followed it. My girlfriend was sleeping, so I had the radio off and drove in silence on this really dark, creepy highway. There were deer crossing signs, so I was driving extra cautious because a family friend had recently hit a deer in their truck, which did quite a number on it and also caused her to break her arm from the impact. I saw there was a pretty sharp curve coming up, so I slowed down to make it carefully, and as I am turning, I see a figure exiting the darkness of the woods. It is a large mountain lion, with blood stained all over the front of its face. Scared the life out of me. I pulled up just after the turn and tried to wake my girlfriend up. I could see its large shadow make its way across the road in my rearview mirror. But by the time my girlfriend woke up, it was gone. She had lived in Wisconsin most of her life and immediately dismissed my claims that it was a mountain lion because they are not really from that area. I told her I know what I saw, but she insisted that I was seeing things. I acted like she was probably right and continued the trip back, but I know what I saw. Story 3. I drove taxi during the night shift, and among many crazy and terrifying things, I saw a toddler, around 2 to 3 years old. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was driving in a very wooded part of our town, just after dropping a customer off, and in the middle of the road was this baby just sitting in the dark. I stopped my cab and turned on my flashers. I proceeded to walk up to the kid, and he just started bawling. I tried to comfort him, but me being in disbelief that a baby with no one around was just sitting there, all I could say was, it is cool, bro." I picked him up, and he started crying frantically. I would too if a stranger came and grabbed me. I put him in the passenger seat and looked for the nearest driveway. It ended up being about 100 yards down the street. I pulled up into what I hoped was his house, and there were maybe 6 or 7 teenagers drinking in the garage. I could not see from the road because all the houses had long dirt driveways. When I pulled up, they acted as if I was not even there until I said, "Hey, this your kid?" After a few "whats?" they came over to the cab and said, "Aiden, where did you go?" Like the baby just goes for midnight strolls. Not a thank you or goodbye or anything. They just took the baby in the house and continued drinking and laughing. As I pulled out, I felt as if I should call the cops or something, but could not bring myself to do it. I am still scared to this day that I will be driving down a dark road and hit a baby. Story 4, not sure if this will count, but here we go. Back in my 20s, I was putting myself through university by working night shifts at a factory. Money was great, but between full-time work and full-time study, I was constantly exhausted. Sleep got worse when I picked up a second job to make ends meet. Parents split up and Dad went into depression, so he was not working, you see. Anyway, after months, I kept falling asleep at the wheel on the way home from work just before dawn, around 4 in the morning. One time as I was driving home all alone after work, I saw half a dozen crocodiles on the road. I swerved to avoid hitting them and almost crashed the car. I was terrified in the moment because they came out of nowhere and were huge, and I had never seen crocodiles in real life before, let alone on a freeway. I pulled over the car and looked in my rearview mirror, but nothing was there. To this day, I do not know if I dreamed those crocodiles or if they were a hallucination from sleep deprivation. Scariest thing I have ever seen, and I am so thankful no one was on the road at the time too. Story 5. Whilst driving from Morelia to Ciudad Hidalgo in Mexico back in the 1980s, we had two ways to get to Ciudad Hidalgo, which was the National Road, or the Old National Road, which was called Mil Cumbres. Mil Cumbres basically means 1,000 curves. That stretch of road literally had 1,000 curves, so a lot of people would get motion sickness when on that road. One evening on our way back to my grandparents who lived in Ciudad Hidalgo, my grandfather was driving and he loved taking Mil Cumbres because it had really nice views and he just really loved driving that road. But since we had the new national road, not a lot of people use that road anymore. So it was kind of desolate with the exception of passing one or two little towns. It was dusk so soon that meant that being on such a desolate road in the mountains, we would be in complete darkness on the road with not many other cars on the same stretch of road. It took 2 hours to get to the town on that road, so maybe 45 minutes into the drive, it had already gotten really dark. And as we were driving, my grandfather started slowing down. I was sitting in the back seat because my grandmother was in the front with my grandfather. So I kind of stood over the front chairs to see why he was slowing down. That is when I saw a huge tree log blocking the road. My grandfather came to a stop and immediately started going in reverse to turn around and get out of there immediately. After we turned, my grandfather stepped on the gas pedal and I was sort of thrown back into the back seat. I immediately turned around to see if I could see anything. And as we were speeding away, I could see men very dimly, since the light from the tail lights from the car were starting to get dimmer and dimmer, coming from out of the adjacent trees next to the tree log on the road with flashlights and guns. We were about to get robbed, and thanks to my grandfather's quick thinking and taking action immediately, we avoided it. That was the last time I was ever on that road. Story 6. A lot of people that drive for a living or have done balls to the wall, cross-country drives can tell you about the running shadows. First time I saw them, I was on the tail end of 12 straight hours of driving. I was driving through the middle of nowhere in the desert at night. Very little light from the sky, no man-made lights even on the horizon. Just the pitiful cone from my truck's headlamp. And being in the middle of the desert, it pretty much only lights up the road ahead, nothing above ground level to catch the light. As I am barreling along, I start to see shadowy figures running alongside my truck out of the corners of my eyes on 2 legs and 4. All I can think about is the creepy stories you read online about things that live out in the desert, or the Asian ghost stories where, if you do not acknowledge the spirit, it cannot harm you. So I have got my eyes glued to the road, refusing to let them flicker off to the side. I rolled my windows up and cranked up the volume on my radio. Drove like that for probably an hour and a half until they slowly petered out, roughly 15 minutes outside of a little one-light town. I have had people try to carjack me. People try to rob me after I pull over to render aid. People jump out at me on twisty mountain roads, you name it. But nothing matching that level of fear the first time I saw them. Felt like my spine was rippling like a ribbon in the wind, trying to jump clear out of my back and hide under the seat. Sleep deprivation mixed with sensory deprivation does some strange things. Story 7, 1978 or 1979. I was the lead singer and guitarist of a punk band called the Nads. Punk was new to Vermont and roundly hated in an era of overblown bands issuing albums of overly instrumented 14-minute pieces. We were three poor kids with secondhand equipment and few gigs. We were also the owner of an ancient Thames van, which had previously served a plumber. His name was still faintly visible on the sides despite many scrubbings. Anyway, we traveled up and down Vermont and also made trips to New Hampshire and Maine, playing where we could. We got a gig playing at a basement bar in Portland, Maine, but the pay would cover not much more than the gas. We gassed up, packed 2 days' worth of sandwiches and a change of underwear, and off we went. Just over the border in Maine, we blew a tire since it was a Thames. It was still afternoon, and there was a garage and gas station nearby, so we took the tire off and walked it over to see if they could repair it. The spare was bald as hell and probably would not have got us home. The road was narrow and in pretty rough shape, and we walked along in our all-black attire and our unfortunate haircuts. The reaction we got from the locals at the station was shock, but we had cash and away we drove. About 20 miles further, the same tire flattened again, and we figured that we had been had. We were in an even more rural area, and this was the time before cell phones, so we were out of luck. Night closed in. We had food to eat and plenty of forest to use, so we just waited for a good Samaritan, or at least daybreak. Sorry, bar that took a chance on us. We lounged around inside the van and played around a bit on a new song we were writing, then ate and tried to sleep. Deep in the night, we heard the screeching of metal being dragged along asphalt, and we bolted upright and peered out the windshield. There a snowmobile was racing along the June road, shooting off sparks behind it like a comet. One guy was driving, and another guy was well surfing behind it on something which looked like a piece of farm machinery, while he clung desperately to a rope tow line. The comet lingered in our eyes as the two disappeared around a wooded corner. We did not say anything for a long while until Bill, our drummer, blurted out, "You guys need to write a song about that stuff." And so Wrench Head Surfing was written. Story 8. This is a story about something that was really scary at the time, but kind of funny in retrospect. Once I was driving through an unfamiliar stretch of desert and mountains on my way to a campground in Utah. The sun had set and it was pitch black outside. We had not seen a town for a long time, which was fine because we did not need fuel. But it is worth noting here that before it had gotten dark, the last several exits that had been marked on the map did not appear to have any people at them. There were not many other cars on the road that we could see, but eventually this vehicle came up behind me, clearly going much faster than I was. He passed me on the left, and as he went around me, I could see that it was a pickup truck with a lift kit. The pickup got back into my lane in front of me. He stayed there for a few seconds, then suddenly swerved to the left and slammed on his brakes. He then cut back over into my lane, so he was behind me and switched on his brights. He followed me like this for some time, getting right on my rear and flashing his brights repeatedly. I started getting nervous at this bizarre and aggressive behavior. I told my wife to help me find a populated exit. The road began to spiral down a steep mountainous slope. What followed next was a progression of increasingly alarming road signs that seemed like they belonged in a Looney Tunes cartoon where a character is about to careen off a cliff. These signs said things like "Watch for wildlife," "Frequent wildlife crossing, next 20 miles," "Watch for ice," "Watch for falling rock," and so on. None of them would have been scary on their own or maybe in the daylight, but at night in a situation where I was starting to panic, they seemed alarming, and it seemed like they were ridiculously increasing in severity. At one point, a sign popped up that said "road damage." Since I was in panic mode, I remember exclaiming, "Why did they not just fix the damage instead of putting up a sign?" Eventually, we found a town with lots of lights, and I promptly exited. I was terrified the guy would follow us, but he went on past me. I pulled into a gas station, and that is when I figured what I probably should have realized a long time before. I had my brights on. Story 9. When I was in community college, I also worked there in the student worker program. As the college was 50 minutes from my house, that meant getting up before the sun. At that time of morning, the roads are usually empty, so if you come up on a slow vehicle, you can pass almost immediately. I come up on a pickup truck and thinking the roads would be clear, I get ready to pass him. I pull the wheel to the left to take a peek and make sure the road is clear and see headlights, so I fell back in line. Car passes, I try again. More headlights, let car pass. Try again, same results. Rinse and repeat a few more times. Man, it is an unusually busy morning. I realized after a couple of attempts that I might be annoying the truck ahead, and they may feel like I am tailgating, so I let off and let them have some room after each attempt thereafter. I let a couple of cars pass and then try again. Same results though. I had never seen it that busy at that time of morning. I just could not get by. We finally get to the intersection where I turn. The truck takes the same left turn, but pulls over on the shoulder afterwards. I think to myself, I realized even before I got by them what they were going to do. Sure enough, they start tailgating me. I figure they probably did not realize I was not driving maliciously and was genuinely trying to get by them. So they are probably a bit mad and will tailgate me in return for a minute and then back off, so I will just ride it out. No big deal. But they do not back off. Fast forward 4 miles and they are still on my tail. By now I am legitimately worried for my safety. This is dear country mine, you rural Illinois. If one hops out and I have to hit my brakes, the truck will rear end me, and the driver will be even more mad. Not to mention we are crossing the line from eye for an eye into intimidation. I made the decision that if the truck is still tailgating me by the time we hit the next intersection and they turn where I do, I am calling the police. I was just getting ready to pull my phone out and hold it up to signal to them my next move to try and deter them. That way though, who knows if they would have been able to see it when they finally backed off. That was one of 3 times I ever worried for my safety on that commute. Other 2 were weather related. I know they did not understand what I was trying to do, and I acknowledge how it must have seemed, but their actions seemed excessive. Story 10. This is the only experience I have ever had like this. Nothing else has come close. Some friends and I, 5 of us, were driving around some rural roads waiting for a friend to arrive to his girlfriend's house. We were just kind of wasting time cruising down some dirt roads around 20 miles an hour talking. My friend who was driving slams on his brakes, and I in the passenger seat looked up, and there was this thing. I had never seen anything like it before. We stopped the car and watched as this thing, which did not have a perceivable head, moved slowly across the road about 15 feet in front of us. It was creepy to say the least. It was approximately 4 feet tall, and we could see its joints moving as it walked slowly with a gait similar to a giraffe. It had very skinny long legs. Its body was about 1.5 feet round. If it had hair, it was pretty short, but the thing was brown. We were all screaming, "What the F is that?" We could not see any perceivable head, and it was walking perpendicular to us. We watched as it slowly walked through these people's yard and behind their house. Needless to say, we were freaking out about it. When we got to my friend's house, we all drew pictures of it separately and showed each other at the same time when we were done to verify that we all saw what we saw. It was the strangest thing I have ever seen, and I have not found any satisfactory explanation to this day, 20 years later. Story 11. I had a weird and somewhat frightening experience one night years ago while on a long, dark road one night. I was in the Navy at the time, and I was on a training trip to Groton, Connecticut. I was quite the partier in younger days, and I would wander damn near anywhere, wherever I thought there was some music, dancing, and action, wink, wink. One night I decided to wander somewhere north of the New London Groton area to see what else was out there. Well, I did not see anything worth mentioning, so I said screw it, and finally turned my rental car around to head back to the base. Now let me set the scene as it really was. I was just driving along this long, dark highway when I spotted a white guy just standing there in the pitch darkness alone and alongside the road. There was no car or anything there. It was just him. As a Southerner, my first impulse was to ask if he was okay. That is until I looked into his eyes. This man looked me right in the eye, and his stare sent a damn chill through me as I drove by. He actually had the look of something between a spirit and an outright axe murderer. I mean, like, this dude did not even look real. He did not say a word to me, and he made no physical gesture. He just stared at me with this evil, weird, and ghostly look in his eyes. Bottom line is this. He scared the life out of me, so I kept my black self moving and got the hell out of there as fast as possible. I was even afraid that I was going to have bad dreams that night. That is just how evil and weird this man looked. This incident happened about 35 years ago, and I never forgot about it, so I hope this puts the story into a better perspective in terms of the Jason effect this dude had on me. Story 12. I was in college at the time, and it was late at night, the day before Thanksgiving, I believe, or at least around that time. I had had class earlier in the day and packed and then headed off on the 10-hour drive to the western edge of Nebraska. It was around 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was in the final stretch of the trip. Driving down a totally deserted highway, only 2 lanes with no shoulder, so the speed limit was 55. I was tired, and having not seen anyone for at least an hour, I kept kicking up my speed up to 80. I was flying down the road. As I crested a hill, I spotted headlights atop a couple of hills down. I did not think much of it, reduced my speed a bit, and got ready to turn off the brights over the next hill. But I did not see any more headlights. I figured they must have turned off down a gravel road. Could have been for any number of reasons. They lived that way, maybe coming home after a night at the bar, and did not want to risk getting pulled over on the highway. But at first, I did not think it was weird. Until boom, a black car hauled ass past me in the direction that car had been heading, with their lights off. I still was not too freaked out until I saw brake lights and then headlights behind me. I hauled ass. I called my grandparents as soon as I noticed the person was gaining on me. I gave them a heads up, and my grandpa said he would be at the end of their half-mile driveway with his shotgun and rifle waiting for me. I still had another 10 miles to go until the nearest town, then about 20 miles on gravel to get to their house. I knew the roads reasonably well, but not well enough to get off the main drag and zigzag across country roads. I was doing 90, and so was this person, but kept their distance. I got to the town and just hauled ass through it. I did not stop for the 2 stop signs or the 1 stoplight. At that point, I was hoping to get pulled over. As I got about a mile from my grandparents' house, my grandpa turned on his headlights and spotlight on his truck and was driving towards me. That is when the person turned back around. Story 13, a ditch and hedge when we were expecting a straight piece of road. Let me just open by saying this was a really stupid idea, and please do not ever attempt this. My friend and I were driving back to his house late at night. It was dark and foggy, with very poor visibility. Both of us had only just passed our driving tests. The roads were small country back roads with steep ditches and hedges on both sides, and you seldom met anyone else on them, especially at that time of night. Somehow the conversation turned to the ability to end up at your destination without remembering how you got there. Fair enough, we had heard people talk about this before. This escalated into, how far do you think you could drive with the headlights off in the pitch black on a road that you drive daily? Theory was quickly put into practice now as a passenger in the car. I can say it was both exciting and terrifying, but my 17-year-old self clearly had no clue of the dangers involved in the experiment we were about to undertake. The first trial went well. Lights went off for what felt like minutes, but was probably only 5 or 6 seconds. When the lights came back on, we were still in the middle of the road, pretty good for a first attempt. The second time we thought we would try for a longer blackout, we were feeling confident. The atmosphere was somewhat tense in the car, but you could feel the adrenaline building the longer the lights stayed off, and the car remained in motion. After what seemed like an eternity, my friend put the lights back on. Now, instead of a nice straight piece of tarmac, we were greeted with the sight of a rapidly approaching grass verge, behind which was a steep ditch and a hedge. We both screamed very loudly as my friend slammed on the brakes and attempted to turn away from the impending collision. The car clipped the verge and skidded to a halt in the middle of the road. Neither of us spoke. After a few minutes, my friend drove the rest of the way home, lights very much on. The only words spoken were from my friend, who said we should probably not mention this to anyone. I just nodded in silence. Has to be one of the most stupid things I have ever been party to. Story 14. Not at night, but at 4 in the morning, when it was pitch black. I was driving to my college orientation by myself, and I was still a rather inexperienced driver when it came to driving outside of my county. I took the wrong exit on an interstate, and my global positioning system told me to follow the road that it let me out on for 2 miles to make a U-turn at the roundabout. It is pitch black, and I am driving down this narrow road in the middle of woods. Nothing but trees on either side. There are no cars on the road but me, and I was thinking about how spooky it was, but I always blast my music so I do not get paranoid about that stuff. I go around a curve and instantly have to slam on the brakes and swerve to avoid a giant piece of metal blocking only my lane. I crossed the double yellow, but I could see nobody was coming, and I did it safely. Shaken up, I kept driving towards the roundabout. It was about another minute. I turn around, still scared about what just happened, and I know to slow down in case there is a car in my lane going around the object on my way back. As I approached the spot with absolutely no cars in sight and nothing but trees around the road, I see a man in a black hoodie and black pants hunched next to the piece of metal in the road, like he was rearranging it in a better spot. I floored it and went 60 down that tiny road until I found the interstate again and got back on. Story 15. Was driving on Route 27, a Costa Rican highway from Pacific Coast to the capital. It was about midnight. The street had a curve so we could not see far away. The windows were down so we were able to hear a big boom and tires screeching. After the curve, there was a big straight bit far into it. We could see a big seafood truck going really fast. 10 seconds later, we see a broken bike. Then I realized just ahead is a ripped human leg laying on the street. Called 911, knowing I was about to find the rest of the body somewhere I park and get some light reflectors out so nobody would run over the leg and cause another accident. As soon as I do it, I hear moaning coming from the bushes on the side of the road. When I get there, I see an old man laying face down around 60 to 70 years old, blood everywhere. He was trying to say something while dying, but all I could make out was esposa, which means wife, but also could mean handcuff, depending on context. Now, I do not get disgusted by blood or a lot of things, so knowing he was going to die either way, I tried turning him, grabbing from his shoulder to lay him with his face up. This failed since his abdomen skin had been ripped open and all his guts slid out. Between the smell that came off and the scene I had just seen, I could not resist the nausea and puked more than I had eaten in a month. Shortly after, the police came and declared him dead on scene. Then the ambulance came and took him away. I stayed since I was curious and got asked to be witness. A lot of people had gathered around by this point, and we started looking for parts of the car helping the police. A guy found a piece of the bumper with the number plate. An officer told me the car had been reported stolen, but I found it weird since who would want to steal a car full of fish? So I checked the time I called 911 and showed the officer, and funny to be told, the car had been reported stolen 8 minutes after I called 911. Months after, a friend told me the guy that died was found with alcohol in his system, and the driver was charged only for filing a false stolen car. Story 16. When I was 18, I was driving my boyfriend home around 2 in the morning when we came up on a pickup truck on fire. The driver had crashed head-on into a massive tree, and the driver's door was crushed against a fence. I called 911, and we started trying to get him out, but the front of the truck was completely smashed. The engine was basically on his knees, and his legs were completely trapped. I remember climbing into the cab of the truck and reaching for him, and there was so much fire I could not even see his face, just an arm in a red and white striped hoodie. He must have been unconscious when we got there, but when I started screaming, so did he. I regret it now because I wish he had stayed unconscious as he died. A guy in a suit pulled me out of the cab, and then suddenly there were first responders and other people everywhere. I did not look when the firefighters pulled the body out, but my boyfriend said it was a head and torso, then just nothing below. I used to take that street to work every day, but I quit for years. I moved to another city for 4 years, and when I moved back and drove down that street for the first time, I could still see the burn damage on the tree he had hit. I never managed to find out any information about the guy, but I looked for months afterward. I still think about it almost every day, almost 10 years later. I wish I could have saved his life. Story 17. When I was in my early 20s, I was working in northern Maine. I had gone over to a possible Tinder hookup's house, and ultimately things did not work out well enough for me to spend the night. I ended up driving home around 3 in the morning that night and was doing my absolute best to keep my eyes open in the dark Maine woods. I remember fiddling around with the radio stations for a few minutes, trying to find a good station on the FM and having no luck. For whatever reason, I started exploring the frequencies and somehow came across what must have been an amateur radio station. Crackling through static and the buzz of the radio came a creepy, high-pitched, halting voice repeating the words, "I am the trash man, I am the trash man, and I am on your radio. I am on your radio," over and over with a strange accompanying beat. After the song ended, the same voice would go into reading numbers and various words backwards in his strange halting style. This broadcast mixed with the twisting dark roads of the backwoods was way too much for me to handle, but for whatever reason, I could not change the station. For about 15 minutes, I was in the range of this radio station, and I probably spent the whole time with goosebumps. Story 18. This was scary at the time, but probably does not seem scary if you did not experience it. I guess it is more about what I could not see than something I did see. Driving from Southern California to Arkansas, my dad and I had been on the road for about 16 or so hours, maybe closer to 20. He had been insisting we stop and rest, and I kept swearing I felt fine to drive, and he could sleep while I drove. He complained he could not sleep in the car, but I did not want to stop, so we kept going. We were in the Texas Panhandle somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and it was pitch black in all directions except for occasional headlights and streetlights close to midnight. No moon, cloudy night, so no stars, and all I could see was the road stretching about 100 feet in front of me, and that is it. I could not see the landscape around me at all. As I drove, I started to feel like I was driving on an incline. Kept driving, and it felt like I was going further and further uphill, steeper and steeper of an incline. I could not see the landscape around me, but I remembered Texas being mostly flat, so nothing felt right about it. But I was not going to say anything to Dad, or I would have to admit he was right. I keep driving, feeling like I am climbing higher and higher, knowing I cannot see the road more than 100 feet ahead of me, and I get this terrible fear that we are going to hit a bend in the highway, and I am going to careen over the side of the embankment to our doom. I am stressed to the point that my knuckles are white on the steering wheel, and finally we come around a slight bend with a bunch of extra streetlights, and I can see the landscape around us is flat land for miles in any direction. I was never on any kind of slope at all. The whole thing was just my brain messing with me in the dark. We pulled over at the next stop and got a hotel. Nothing really happened, but for about half an hour, I was convinced we were just seconds away from driving over the side of a cliff. Story 19. The very first night I got my driver's license, I was driving home. The street I lived on was a 15 miles per hour, one-way kind of a service-style road with woods on both sides. There were apartments to the left and a main road to the right with this little narrow one-way road between with woods on each side. It was always kind of disorienting because it was hidden off of a main street, so you go from traffic and lights to basically dark woods. So I am driving and a man comes out of the woods and stands in the road. I slam on the brakes and notice he is covered in what looks like blood. He walks up to my car and slams his hands on my hood and looks at me before walking into the woods on the other side of the road. I had my roommate's dog in the back seat, a pit bull mix, and the dog is growling and going crazy. I panic. Foot on the gas as hard as I can, I am shaking and crying and run into my apartment and tell my roommate, who thinks it is a prank, until he sees bloody handprints on the hood of my car. He went to a neighbor to call the police way before cell phones. Ends up the man had harmed his girlfriend in one of the apartments and was trying to run from the police. Having the dog in the car probably stopped him from trying to carjack me, etc. I had nightmares for a while after that. Story 20. My boyfriend and I left the bar at about 2 in the morning and were driving about 10 minutes away to a food truck to get some sandwiches. You have to go down this street that is a main street, but the town is not super great, and at night it is pretty deserted and poorly lit. Anyways, we were coming up to a red light on that road, and a large man walks slowly into the road in front of us, stops in the middle of the lane, and turns to stare at us. My boyfriend slowed down even more. We were maybe about 20 feet away at this point. Instead of stopping, though, my boyfriend sped up and drove around him, and through the red light could see no cars coming and kept going. He had me call the police, and he drove to the food truck a minute or two away. I grew up in very safe areas and did not really consider the consequences of what might have happened had we stopped. We got our food after I got off the phone with the police, and we had to go back down that road in order to get home. But the road has a town center in the middle of it, so we could see the spot where the man was but not actually have to drive by him. As we approached the spot, we saw the guy. We saw police cars there, and 5 or 6 officers pulling people out of the bushes, and the large gentleman was cuffed on the sidewalk. Story 21. I was on a very rural 2-lane unlit road through cornfields somewhere in Georgia for about 6 hours on a road trip from Massachusetts to Nashville, Tennessee. It was about 3 in the morning and I was getting pretty tired. My partner was asleep in the back, so I was kind of alone. I was driving a newer Lincoln with the blind spot assist in the mirrors, which basically tells you when there is an object near the back right or back left of the vehicle. After about 5 hours on this road, we lost cell service, so the music I was streaming stopped, and even the global positioning system in the car stopped working, so it showed our location, but there was no map overlay. Really weird, but I did not think anything of it because I knew I would be on the road for a super long time, just going straight. There was a bit of fog, but it did not really make it hard to see the road ahead. The road was pretty straight and wide speed limit was 50 miles per hour. So I was only worried about other vehicles or obstacles in the road, but there were literally one or two other vehicles on the road the entire time. I hit a patch of fog that got pretty thick, so I slowed down to around 25 to 30 miles per hour. A minute or two into the denser fog, both blind spot monitor lights lit up solid. They would stay on for about 5 to 10 seconds and go off and then come on again. I was checking the mirrors and could not see much because of the fog, and there were obviously no cars near me, so I was a little confused. The fog was getting more and more dense at this point, so I had slowed down to nearly a crawl. With no warning, the road turned into a bridge, which I can only assume was going over some small river. I literally could not see more than 10 feet in front of the car, so I had no idea what was in the road ahead. As soon as we were past the bridge, the fog completely cleared, but the blind spot monitors kept flashing on and off. I am not sure if it was me being tired and not thinking straight, but the only thing I could think of was that something was following or chasing the car, staying perfectly in the blind spots the whole time. I kept seeing glimpses of things passing in the mirrors and my heart was beating super fast. I was in full fight or flight mode. My partner woke up and asked where we were. I looked down and the global positioning system was back to normal, and the music started playing from my phone. Blind spot mirrors were back to normal. Nothing bad ended up happening, but I was really creeped out by the whole thing. I tracked our trip with Google Maps, and I was never able to find the bridge that we passed over. So I am not even sure that the fog part even happened, or if I was just so tired that I imagined it. Pretty vivid memory of being creeped out, though. Story 22, I was driving from South Carolina to Maryland on Interstate 95 in June, a few years back, to visit family friends. I was meeting my parents and sister there. They left earlier that day, but I had to work until 6 in the evening, so I did not leave until around 8 in the evening. Now, anyone who has driven Interstate 95 can tell you that there are long stretches of nothing small towns, and more nothing interspersed with the occasional city. It is the middle of nowhere. Last town was 10 miles back, around 9:30 in the evening, and it is raining so hard I can barely see the road. I slow down and pull over to the right shoulder as soon as possible. I lock the doors, throw the car in park, and prepare to wait out the rain. The rain eases off after about 10 minutes, and I get ready to get on the road again when I notice something weird off in the trees to the side. It looks like a pile of black trash bags with white sticks poking out. Oh, I call the police. Then I call my parents and tell them I am going to be late. I will call them later. Do not worry, etc. It took the state troopers almost an hour to get there. They were responding to a bunch of traffic accidents with fatalities, and this was not a priority. In the meantime, I have worked myself into a state of panic, thinking I have stumbled upon a killer's dump site, and I am about to be killed for discovering the body, because I watch entirely too many crime shows, and it really is not good for my anxiety. The state law enforcement division gets there, takes one look, yep, that is a human skull. They start processing the scene, take my statement, tell me they will be in touch, send me on my way. It is now almost 1 in the morning. My parents are frantic. I called them, reassured them, and told them I would see them the next day. Then I turned my car around and went back. To my knowledge, they have never identified the body that was in those bags. They probably never will. Story 23, was driving home from work when I was in college. It was about 2:30 in the morning. I lived in the mountains just above a small beach in college town. I am 3/4 home on this winding mountain road when I come around a corner and see a car had sideswiped a telephone pole. The car bounced off and is in the middle of the road. I back my car up so it is obvious before the corner and get out and run to the car. Its passenger side is crumpled and the driver's side is mostly fine. I realize the telephone pole is somehow broken and then collapsed back onto itself. It looks super unstable, but my focus is mostly on the car. When I look in the car, there are two 20-ish-year-old girls inside. As I look in, the driver, a brunette, comes to and looks at me, and then for her friend. A petite blonde girl, she looks perfectly peaceful, but not moving the car, pressing in on her. The driver starts to scream and yell and is freaking out. I tell her not to move, that she could be hurt, to try and calm down and focus on me. I get her door open and tell her we need to get her out and out of the road. It is not safe. She calms a bit. I get her seatbelt off and pull her out. She has a bit of a limp as she tries to stand, and I just quickly pick her up and run off the side of the road and lay her down in the dirt. I tell her to try not to move, that she could be injured. She insists I check on her friend. I agree. In this time, 2 more cars come behind mine. The first guy comes behind me and takes over, trying to calm the driver. The second guy comes up half a minute later and quickly says, "I am an off-duty cop. Are you the driver?" Thank the gods. I fill him in. He says to follow him. We go to his car and he pulls out a flashlight and a professional first aid kit and rubber gloves. We go to the car and he crawls over to the blonde girl. He tells me to go to the passenger side and shine the light on her. He starts checking for vitals. It is then I realize she is blue motionless and likely not with us anymore. She is very pretty, is what I think in my head, and young. It is so depressing. He is trying to cut her seatbelt. I do not think he can move her with the door pressing on her. Then behind me, 2 or 3 paramedics push past me. One leaning in the window I'm at, the others prying open the back door. When did they get there? I look up and realize 2 paramedic trucks are there. The 4th paramedic is with the driver. The off-duty cop gets out of their way and is standing next to me for a bit. Nothing else we can do, just let them take care of it. We chat for a bit and then I just leave. No one wanted a statement or anything, or so it seemed. I was not able to find any info in the paper. I do not know what happened to the girls. This was in 1997. I was just a scared pizza delivery guy and college student. Story 24. Early 1980s rural Iowa, about midnight. I was in the back seat with Mom and Grandma. Dad was driving Grandpa in shotgun. Grandpa shouts, "Watch it," and Dad swerved to miss this massive cow. We went about 1/10 of a mile when we see oncoming lights. Dad starts blinking brights, anything to slow the oncoming car. This MG goes flying past and Grandpa tells Dad to turn around. We got back to where we had swerved. Cow was injured in the westbound ditch. The MG, what was left of it, upside down in the eastbound ditch. Dad and Grandpa got the flashlights from the car and sent all of us to the closest place to call 911. I still remember that bike bar and the red neon. So a biker follows us to the wreck, goes to the cow, manhandles the head to see the ear tag, gets on his bike and roars off. At this point, it starts getting chaotic. Dad and Grandpa are yelling for the guy to wait for the ambulance, but he crawls out of the ditch. Biker returns truck behind him and a big backhoe with its floodlights on. Sheriff speeds up lights, going, ambulance finally gets there, along with a few other cars. I remember being fascinated with the backhoe as it went straight to the cow. This big person gets out with a shotgun and 2 rounds go off. Something was thrown over the hoe before it scooped the now dead cow up. The guy is sitting on the gurney. Men are directing traffic like it was the middle of the day, and the person that scooped up the cow was butchering it right there. I think I must have gotten tired and fallen asleep at some point, but I do remember Dad getting back in the car with a big armload of white butcher paper-wrapped cow. Story 25. A good friend and I had just finished up a late-night drive, just small-town things, and I was on my way home from dropping her off. It was about 3 in the morning on a Tuesday night, so the town is basically dead. You will usually only see like 1 or 2 cars driving, and rarely anyone walking around. On the way to my house, there's this sharp bend you have to go around, so you have to slow down to about 15 miles per hour to make it. As I am coming up on the bend, I see a dude crossing the street right at the end of the turn and do not really think anything of it. I am just about to start slowing down to take this turn when the dude stops right in the middle of my lane and turns to face my car. I slow down even more and kind of creep up on him. When my headlights reflect on him, I see that he is just standing there smiling. Now, this is not any kind of normal smile. It is the kind that hurts to do the biggest grin you can possibly force yourself to do. So we just sit there like that for probably 15 seconds. It feels like he is staring straight through my windshield, directly into my eyes, with that big grin. Eventually, he puts his hand on the hood of my car and starts circling around to my driver's side. As soon as he is out of the way of the front of my car, I just say, "Nope," blow past him, and speed the whole way home. Now my town has a bit of a substance problem, so I do not know if he was hopped up on something, but either way, it was creepy as hell. Story 26. My friend and I were driving with his dad to the airport around 3 in the morning. It is incredibly foggy and dark back roads in the Pocono Mountains. All of a sudden, a man emerges from the fog, waving frantically. My friend's dad slams on the brakes and swerves to avoid him. He gets out and starts talking to the man. He was trying to warn us about a car accident just ahead that had happened only minutes before. If not for his warning, we likely would have been a part of it. The only light on the scene came from our 2 sets of blinkers, and the thick fog reflected most of it back at us. We climbed out to get a closer look and find that the 2 cars, a large SUV and a pickup, had hit each other head-on, apparently at high speed. The large pickup was facing us, but we could not see inside further away in thick fog. The SUV was closer and had been turned sideways from the impact. The doors were caved and the windows were all gone. The driver was in perfect view and seemed to be the only lit thing on the whole street. He was slumped over the airbag and bleeding from his head. I remember leaning over to my friend and sort of whispering in his ear, "I think that guy is dead." My friend nodded, and after a few moments of staring, we realized there were more people in the car. We went over to the other side of the vehicle and looked in the passenger seat. To this day, I am not 100% sure what I saw. I remember thinking it looked like a woman's head because there was so much hair, but I could not reconcile that with the fact that it was in front of the seat and so close to the floor of the car. It seemed like the body had been completely swallowed by the warped steel of the vehicle, leaving only the top of the head exposed. Or maybe her body had simply been pressed small enough to fit into an unnaturally small area beneath her head and the floor. Long as I stared, my mind could not make sense of it. The third passenger I noticed was still recognizably human. He was sprawled out over the middle console, his body in both the front and back seat, but very much intact and uncompressed. I would later find out he was alive, though unconscious. Before I could decide which, I heard a voice from the back seat. There was a kid, probably around 16 or 17, coming to. He had been sitting behind the front passenger seat, and as soon as he was awake and noticed us, he began asking if we had seen his cell phone. We tried to ask if he was okay or in any pain, but all he could do was ask where his phone was. He was in such severe shock he did not even notice his 2 dead friends in the front, and his dead-looking friend laying across multiple seats next to him. He just kept looking for his cell phone. We could not just leave him like that. The car was not on fire or anything, and we did not really have any medical expertise to offer. But it just seemed so, I do not know, macabre to leave him there in shock, looking for his cell phone surrounded by the broken bodies of his friends. So we tried to get him out, but the door was jammed shut from the impact. The window was gone, so we tried to coax him to climb out, but he did not seem able to. I finally realized I would have to pull him out, but he was covered in blood. I know it sounds a little selfish, but at the time, all I could think about were pathogens and all the reasons people warn you not to touch blood. My friend and I deliberated for a minute. We looked for a towel or something to help, but with none in sight, I finally decided to just pull my hoodie sleeves over my hands and commit. Fortunately, the poor survivor stopped looking for his phone long enough to grab my arm and climb as I pulled him through the space that used to be a window. Once he was safely on the grass, we looked him over as best as we knew how. Fortunately, most of his cuts seemed superficial, and the first man to stop had already called 911. The other car, he informed us, had no passengers, and the driver was already dead. For a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. I thought about how close we came to being part of this accident. I thought about all the death I had seen, and how tragic the coming moment of clarity would be for this kid when he realized the friends he set out with died around him. My friend snapped me out of my thoughts. He was pointing at the kid. I looked down to see he was right next to me, still searching for his phone. He did not seem any more aware of the tragedy that had befallen him than he was of what my friend was actually pointing to, that I was standing on his hand. I quickly jumped off and apologized, but the kid was so in shock he did not even feel it. Like everything else that night, I am sure he eventually did. We drove away as the paramedics and police arrived, still trying to catch that flight in Newark. I have driven that road many times since, often through dense fog. When I do, my thoughts invariably drift to all the broken bodies I saw that night and the image of that poor, bloody friend of theirs, stumbling over them, looking for his phone. I think of the blood-stained hoodie I wore home, and the words my friend's dad muttered over and over again, at first to us and later to himself, "Boys that will haunt you for the rest of your lives." Story 27, I was the passenger while my boyfriend was driving. I have some pretty nasty night blindness, so I am typically forbidden from touching the steering wheel as soon as it gets dark. We were driving along the dirt roads surrounding our town. It is fairly small and is completely surrounded by farms, so dirt roads are insanely common crisscrossing between the corn and bean fields. It was insanely dark, and the cornfields we were passing were about ready to harvest, so you can imagine how unnerving it is when a storm suddenly picks up and we are on a rinky-dink dirt gravel road. We heard it coming, but it did not stop us from wanting to just drive around for a bit. I am DJing the night away with a careful selection of atmospheric songs, so this means I am buried in my phone and not looking up. This is fine until my boyfriend just starts screaming. I will not lie without even looking. My natural response is to also scream. So we are now both screaming, but he is slowing down. I am trying to understand what I'm actually screaming at when I notice a hulking black mass in front of us, lit up by a fork of lightning through the sky. Now I know why I am screaming, but now I am panicking even more and kind of flailing in my seat. When we finally manage to stop because this thing is dead center of the road and there is no space to turn around, we hear this quiet moo. It escalates as our lights hit it, and the source of our fears is just a giant black cow. Our guess is that he was a runaway from one of the nearby farms, but just decided a road was a good place to be. I now utterly refuse to go night driving on the dirt roads because this just sucked a bit too much. Glad he is okay and we are okay, but very genuinely the worst cow ever. Story 28. When I was in my freshman year of college, I was dating a girl who lived in Long Island, New York. One night we went out to get a pizza pie because she had some kind of discount coupon. Anyway, we get to the place, order the pizza, and start to drive back to her house. It was a hot summer night and we were both very hungry, so we pulled over to the side of the road, a pit stop. The car was facing the highway with its back, and in front was the water. We started eating the pizza when suddenly an Asian man starts walking to my car. He was wearing a jacket, baseball cap, and one of his hands remained in his pocket. He began to circle my car, and we are both thinking, what is going on? Anyway, I think nothing of it until he approaches my window. I roll it down a little, and then he asks me if I can read something for him. So I open the door. I think nothing of it, so as I begin to open it halfway, he quickly hands me a piece of paper. I glance down, and it is a newspaper article folded to one article. I then notice his hand went straight to the top of the door to hold it. He was standing very close to me. I notice his other hand remained in his pocket. I glance down to the article and read it out loud, Cop Killer Hunt. At this point, my girlfriend at the time is whispering, "Let us go," while starting to cry. I tried to close the door, but he was not letting me. Something in my mind quickly told me to react, and thankfully I did. I threw his newspaper back, and thankfully the car was still on, so I put it on reverse and slammed the gas. He hit the ground, and then, while getting up, I put it on drive and drove maybe 20 feet. Tried to get out and ask what is going on. I do not know why. However, he was bolting towards me, so I just closed the door right back and drove out of there. Went to her house, and after the police station. I really think I would have been harmed that night if I did not react the way I did. Story 29, I was driving with my fiancé late one night because we could not sleep, and we had been driving for about an hour when we had this big truck come up behind us. It was one of those off-roading ones, at least I assume, because it was huge and his brights were on. I was thinking, great, just what I need, someone tailgating me. He was so close to my bumper that I could feel his engine vibrating my car. He followed us for a good few miles before I got fed up and found a pull-off so he could just pass me, since he obviously had to burr up his attitude about something, and I was not about to get into a wreck just because someone wanted to tailgate me. But this driver did not pass me. Instead, he pulled up behind me and sat there idling, flashing his brights at me. I drove off quickly and sped away. At this point, I did not care about wrecking anymore. I just wanted to get away. I was trying to think of a rational reason for him to be following me. Tail light out. No, I just got a tune-up. They would have noticed. Someone in my back seat. It is too small for us not to have noticed. Something hanging out my trunk. No, my car would have told me, because she is one of those cars that has a trunk sensor that goes off when the trunk opens what is going on. I could not think of anything. My fiancé white-knuckling it in the passenger seat suggested I slow down just a little bit, because going 60 on country back roads is not exactly smart. But all I could think of was getting away. I was also thinking that maybe if I go fast enough, I will get pulled over so I can tell them what is happening. Of course, the chances of that were slim because we were way out in the countryside and the closest police station was like a half-hour away. He followed us for half an hour still, right on my bumper, following me curve for curve before I got my wits about me and realized, oh, call 911. Except that neither me nor my fiancé had our phones. We had left for a night ride to wear our insomnia down. Why would we need our phones? I could have slapped myself then for leaving it at home. It is the 21st century. What was I thinking? Pissed off and really scared, I turned towards a road I knew would take me to the highway, which would lead right into town. All I could think was if I cannot call the police, driving to them is the next best thing. I finally reached the highway, and I guess he got tired of playing his game with us, or he knew where I was headed, because he honked at us for a good 20 seconds, flashed his brights, and turned off the highway. We got home about an hour later because my paranoid mind wanted to make sure we were not followed. It was probably just some bored kids wanting to scare someone because they thought it was funny and it worked. It scared me. This was 4 years ago and I still get nervous when a truck is behind me because I do not know their intentions. Story 30. It was during the mid-1990s in North County, San Diego. My friend dropped me off at the gas station where I worked after we got back from a party. It was around 2 in the morning and I just had to ride a few miles to my apartment. As I was getting on my motorcycle, I saw this old boat of a car from the 1970s flying down the road going between 70 and 80 miles per hour in a 45. I asked my friend if that guy thought he was driving a Porsche. He laughed and then hopped in his car and drove off. I pulled out on my bike and started riding down the road when I saw that same car that was going so fast stopped off the side of the road with no lights on. I was confused as to what was happening, and I looked around. To the left, far off the road, was another car. It was a green Volkswagen Cabriolet, at least 100 or more feet off the road. They had gotten into a head-on collision, and it seemed like everyone was hurt. It was dark and quiet, and I hopped off my motorcycle and started running towards the convertible, scared as to what I might see. As I got closer, there was a girl in the car looking at me and asking me not to leave her. The convertible top was down, and her face was as pale as the moon, as I think she was going into shock. She was begging me to stay with her. I told her that I was going to get her out of the car and stay with her. This was before cell phones were common, and we were alone on this road by San Elijo Lagoon. I went to open the door, but the door was jammed shut and would not open. The car was smoking, and I was afraid it might catch on fire. I reached in and lifted her out of the top and carried her about 100 feet from the car where I felt we were safe. I placed her gently on the ground, and she was still asking me not to leave her. She said that she could not feel one of her legs and asked me if it was okay. I looked down and her foot was broken off and dangling in her stockings. I lied and told her that her leg looked fine. Another guy drove up and yelled over to me that he was going to help the other car. The other car was catching on fire, but the guy was able to break the glass and rescue the family that was in the 1970s car. The driver was under the influence in that car and had his wife and a little boy with him. A fire truck showed up and they were very thankful that we had done what we did. The only reason they knew that there was an accident was my friends saw the accident and raced home to call 911. The girl I pulled out lived and had to have major surgery to reconstruct her foot. I got to see her once after when she came to the gas station that I worked at and hugged me. She was in a wheelchair, but very thankful to be alive. Story 31. I went to high school in a town of 1,500 people in the Midwest. My friends and I would always go country cruising, and after a while we would dare each other to go sit in a few of the really old rural cemeteries or abandoned houses that had ghost stories. It was usually a fun way to get scared and pass some time. There were only 2 times that I was actually terrified, and one was driving at night with one friend. We drove by an old cemetery that I had just had the incident that was the first time I was actually terrified. So the cemetery is on a country road and is surrounded by cornfields. All the corn was harvested and the moon was full, so you could see the cemetery plot with a fence and the trees and nothing around it but empty fields. So we stopped just past the cemetery as I am telling the story, and my friend is looking out my window and starts to get wide-eyed and open her mouth. I turn and there is a basketball-sized light floating about 3 feet above the ground. I think it is just somebody with a lantern, but I cannot see anybody near. The light then begins to move in a straight line, and I still cannot see anything around it. So I put the car in gear and take off, and it followed us, staying about 20 yards away in the cornfield. Once we got to the paved road, it was just gone.